Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are talking with Dan Lagana. He is the new chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Thank you so much for being here, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
So you're what, 90 days into this brand new job?
Something like that, yeah.
But the Fairfax Democratic Committee is in a huge county, and it's a huge committee, and there's a lot of moving parts, which is why we are known as sort of the bellwether area of Virginia. Right. As Fairfax County goes, so goes the state. Is that true?
It is true, and maybe so goes the United States. I mean, who knows? Fairfax County is huge, 1.2 million people, 243 precincts. Our orientation as a county committee is local, but as we are right outside of the nation's capital, inevitably you get these national currents that make their way into our politics and into local politics. But really what we focus on is getting local Democrats elected. So that's everyone from your supervisors to your school board, to even some jobs that maybe folks haven't really heard of, a clerk of the court, right. Sheriff.
Right.
We have a soil and water commission here. So all these people are part of our local electeds, and that's who we work for to get elected.
So you bring up a very interesting point about local elections. So tomorrow's May 1st. We have municipal elections at various parts of the county. Right. Vienna Town Council is one of those races. Herndon Town Council has moved their races to November.
Right.
So has Falls Church City.
Right.
Fairfax City has not. So there's a little bit of changeover, and we can talk about that more in depth. But for a lot of these local elections, they're nonpartisan. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean that people can't run as a Democrat or get endorsed by the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, but there will be no R or D on the ballot.
Correct. So, this brings up a few things about us, and it's also, part of it is unique to our area. We have a lot of government employees here. And these government employees are prohibited from engaging in certain political activities or associate either fundraising or outright participation. So having nonpartisan offices, if you will, is a way for everyone to serve around here. But I think in terms of the committees, these folks who are running can seek our endorsement. Right. So they essentially just come before us, and we have a process, and they fill out a questionnaire. We may have forums, we may have debates, and we will decide whether or not to endorse a particular person for an office. And once we do, we will put their names on our sample ballots, which we hand out on the polls at Election Day, which are very powerful. You get a ballot, and you might see your neighbor with a blue piece of paper, and on that paper it says, Jane Smith, City Council, and this is the recommended candidate for the Democratic Party.
Right. So, and this is true particularly, so we had a very recent special election. Karen Keyes-Gamarra ran for the school board.
School board at large.
And so this was something that was absolutely nonpartisan in that there was no R or D on the ballot for the school board, but there was a lot of organizing that was done around her campaign that made it clear that she's a Democrat.
Correct. So Karen's race is if you were to pick out any single campaign that really showcased what the Fairfax County Democratic Committee does and what our role is, that would be it right there. We marshaled support for this candidate this is a nonpartisan, school boards are nonpartisan positions on the ballot. She won our endorsement process. We had a very competitive endorsement process. Many eminently qualified candidates ran. Karen emerged victorious. She ran. And we put together the combined strengths of our local committees, and we are made up of many different jurisdictions, which themselves have Democratic committees. We pulled our money together, and we were able to use our offices and our access to data and information to really run this sort of full-scale, very highly professional campaign to get her elected in November.
And that is a great example of how...
Excuse me, in August.
Right, and so that's a great example of how committee organizing power can really be at play even in nonpartisan elections.
Right.
How do you feel about, because it's such a huge county, I mentioned that Falls Church City and Herndon have moved their elections to November, Fairfax City and Vienna have not, they're in May. You know, I have my own opinion about the difference in outcomes. What is your opinion in the May versus November election debate?
I don't see a reason for the elections to be in May. I just don't agree with it. They need to be in November. That is when overwhelmingly the majority of people in your jurisdiction are going to vote. I question the reason why you would want to keep something in May over the long term. Perhaps there's a reason way back in the day. Maybe. But, you know, the reason Herndon moved theirs, they have much greater participation.
Right.
It's better for citizens. If you have federal voters or people that are, you know, only vote in federal years or statewide election years, having the Herndon Town Council on the ballot is good. They see it. They identify with it, and it's another way to engage them into their local community. And I don't understand why Vienna and the city of Fairfax don't do the same.
You know, I don't either, but it's a powerful thing. And one of the arguments I have heard is about this whole thing around the Hatch Act, which, or, you know, I would be prohibited because it would be a partisan race.
Right.
With the counter argument being there's no R or D next to your name.
Correct.
And you can still be a nonpartisan candidate for city council, regardless of whether it's in November or May.
Right.
What makes the difference is the identification on the ballot.
That's correct. It doesn't change anything at the end of the day. If you're really, it's not it's not a valid argument to say that they are that we are preserving the neutrality of or the nonpartisanship of these positions. The reality is that they're going to appear on the ballot the same way. What they're trying to do is, in a federal year when Democratic turnout is much higher and we have our sample ballots out there, this is an attempt to prevent people from, to shield them from that much higher voter turnout. And so if we have an endorsement process ourselves, it doesn't change for federal years. The school board members are on the ballot in November in our local elections.
That's right.
So why wouldn't the town council members be as well?
Right. So you bring, as you said, a lot of organizing power, but there are many layers and levels. So within Fairfax County, which is a county designation, there are 3 congressional districts.
Right.
The 11th, the 10th, and the 8th. And they have their own committees, right? So, and then you've got, you know, Democratic, like the Providence District Democratic Committee and the Fairfax City Democratic Committee, and you've got magisterial districts then too. So, you know, kind of explain to us how all of these various committees work within the context of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee.
Right. You really have to unpack some of this stuff. You know, the best way to think about this is that you have congressional districts. The committees, the Democratic committee for each congressional district, you know, serves as the political organizing force for that congressional district, for those boundaries. Those boundaries overlap with our boundaries here in Fairfax County. And we have our own committees within each of our jurisdictions. So some of your viewers may live in Providence or Drainesville or Mount Vernon. And so those jurisdictions, the boundaries of those jurisdictions, are the same boundaries that we use for our Democratic committees. And what we do is those committees work to elect those local representatives in the same manner and serve as the organizing force for those areas, in the same manner almost that the congressional district committees do. The difference is that once you get into the hierarchy of things on the Democratic Party, the congressional districts really are the next step down on the state party. And then in a manner, the county parties are as well. That's a little bit more arcane county or political Democratic Party organizing. But for the sake of your viewers, you have the county parties work on electing county people. and the congressional district committees work for that congressional district.
Great. So because some of these committees tend to be very hierarchical, I don't know a better way of saying it.
No, that's right.
We haven't always seen a big influx of younger people
Right.
into these highly structured sort of organizations. After the November 2016 election, however, we did see a lot of new faces.
We did. You know, we saw a lot of new faces. Many of them were young. If I were to take the mean or the average age of the new population, it would be a little younger, I would say, but not completely younger. I would say that you probably, with the influx and interest, at least in Fairfax County, was a lot of what you saw a lot of new people, but you saw highly professional folks, female.
A lot of women.
It was,
a lot of women
I mean,
were activated.
This was a female-driven surge.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And highly professional, well-educated, probably reliable federal voters, reliable election, or multi-election year voters, maybe primary voters, but never took that step to join the Democratic Committee. And I think that is that was sort of their next step. But you do see, and I think this runs parallel to the county's growth and urbanization, is you did see this influx of highly professional late 20 and 30 somethings joining our committee. That reminded me a bit more of the Arlington Democratic Committee than the Fairfax Democratic Committee, which was always much more of a bedroom community Democratic committee, right?
And some of these folks stepped up to take leadership positions.
Yeah.
Like they put themselves out there, and people are, because I remember the 11th CD organizing, and people are like, who are these folks? And they were reliable Democratic voters. They had just never stepped up to participate.
Right.
And now they were stepping up and going, I really want to have a seat at the table and be involved in some of this decision making.
Right. A classic example of that of that surge is, I believe you've had Stare Calhoun from Network Nova on here.
I have.
Some of that is a case in point of, if you go to a Network Nova meeting, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You see tons of younger folks.
Well, that is a good thought. We're going to pause here while we take a break. After the break, we're going to be back talking with Dan Lagana of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee about how we've seen changes here lately and who is participating in the committee and the impact these newcomers are making here in the Northern Virginia region. Join us after the break.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation.
You're resigning.
Why?
You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
Oh, I forgot. I'll do better. Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bagging lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did. Mm-hmm.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we're talking with Dan Lagana, the new chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Apparently we have a caller from Alexandria. Do I have Lesher on the line?
Yeah. Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay.
Okay, so the question I had was referencing earlier about kind of getting support with the committee and how there's not like party tags on those ballots. Have there been much instances of people who might be like not Democratic who get support, or are there like limitations to that? You try to protect against that somehow. Is that a good thing or like a bad thing? How do you deal with that kind of situation?
That's kind of an interesting question about, so the endorsement process, which Dan explained, is that when people ask to be endorsed by the Democratic Party, that's a process. If somebody is saying that they are a Democrat, anybody can say that they are running as a Democrat. It doesn't mean that they've been endorsed by a particular organization like the FCDC. I think a lot of nonpartisan candidates prefer not to be affiliated with any particular party. Speaking from Fairfax City, there's a number of candidates who do not affiliate with any of the parties. You know, I think that's a choice as far as the candidates who are running. And a lot of people will get endorsements, and the candidates running in tomorrow's election have gotten endorsements from former mayors, they've gotten endorsements from local leaders, they've gotten endorsements from business leaders, and so those kinds of endorsements are not partisan. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think also, a candidate who doesn't seek an endorsement or decides not to runs a risk, but maybe for whatever reason they feel that they just don't want to do it, and they will seek endorsements from other electeds or so forth. At the end of the day, candidates are responsible for managing and running their own races and raising the funds that they need and talking to the voters that they have to talk to. The parties can only really do so much. Our sample ballot is a very powerful tool that we hand out on Election Day, and we have excellent precinct coverage in Fairfax County. Every single precinct we have covered. But that isn't the end-all be-all. And you have to raise money to send mail and to run ads on Facebook and to talk to voters.
But as we were talking about with the Karen Keys-Gamarra campaign, that is technically a nonpartisan race for school board. Right. But the Democratic Party, and she asked for that endorsement against other people who asked for that endorsement.
Correct.
So what the party did for her was help with the organizing, and part of that was putting people at the precincts on voting day in order to hand out her literature or give people a palm card or a sample ballot.
Right. With Karen's race too, that was totally turnout. That was us doing the paid communication, so mail, door knocking, Facebook ads, phone calling to reliable voters to turn them out and to tune them into this race, because these are low turnout affairs, and it was orchestrated that way to be a low turnout affair by the Republican that she replaced. So
right, and and again, this comes back to November or May, and there's a lot of games that are played with special elections too. A lot of who decides when somebody. One of the things that I point out in statewide elections is that Jennifer Wexton, Eileen Fillercorn, and Kathleen Murphy all won in special elections where it snowed. Right. Now, is there a correlation between women and snow and special elections? I'm not sure. I'm just saying I can give you that data set and say. But of the timing of this, sometimes you only have a matter of weeks to have a primary, mount a campaign, and then go to the polls in a special election.
Right. So, and you have to have the organization in place to leap into that. And sometimes we're the only party in town, so to speak, no pun intended.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is a county race like Karen Keys-Gamarra, countywide race for school board at large. I mean, it's both a race. It's a race that's small in terms of the amount of people that will be paying attention to it, but very large in scope. I mean, Fairfax County is the number of registered voters larger than the congressional district. So you have to really run a race and devote more resources than any candidate could reasonably raise on their own in that circumstance. But, you know, Jennifer Wexton, great example. You know, same thing with Eileen and with Kathleen Murphy. These were races that were run. You had to turn around, the snap of a finger, have an organization in place, get the money in place, get your staff in place, and go out and do the hard work and turn around and get it done.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe is not on everybody's radar, because when you talk about magisterial districts, you know, even that is so insider baseball.
It is,
like,
right.
do people know, oh, I live in the Drainesville district. Oh, me, I live in Mount Vernon. I mean, Mount Vernon's an actual place,
right.
more than like Providence district.
Right.
Or how about Sully district? I'm like, do people even understand this whole concept of magisterial districts? Voters, average voters?
You know, so yes and no is the answer. The voters, because we have elections every year in Virginia, you know, you just can't take a break from it.
Right.
And so the electorate in local election years, which are odd years, the last one was 2015, the next one is next year in 2019, they're going to be a lot more attuned. And maybe they don't know exactly the contours of their boundaries, but they know that John Faust is their supervisor and they live in McLean, you know, or they know that Kathy Smith is their supervisor and they live in Chantilly. So, you know, I don't know if people know exactly where they live, but you bring up a good point. There's some of these magisterial districts, or any district really, pick them now, there's no there in a lot of them.
Right. You'd have to look at a map. I mean,
you'd have to look at a map. If you asked me as a kid, and I grew up right off of Richmond Highway, if I lived in Mount Vernon or Lee, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I mean, I lived in Mount Vernon, but across the street, they say, yeah, maybe Mount Vernon. They have no clue.
Yeah,
you know?
And that's so crazy, and that's so archaic to my mind too. Just these very archaic things that we keep perpetuating. And so I guess I'm kind of excited about disruptors that are coming into the system saying there has to be a better way of doing this. You mentioned Network Nova before our last break. There's Win Virginia PAC, you know, and this was a force that came up. Tom Perriello ended up working for them during the course of the 2017 elections. He covered the state. They did training. I mean, they did very innovative things that was very much outside both what PACs normally do and outside what committees do. I mean, they kind of reinvented something else.
Right. You know, I think that one of the biggest stories has been this groundswell of progressive activism, and it really reinforced the idea that you will win. You know, what is it? Divided you beg, united united you bargain, or so to speak. I mean, that's a similar way to view about it. You're stronger as if we view ourselves as the progressive Democratic whole, not as the Democratic Party is this sort of entity, this sort of big monolith that must, you know, be respected and bow down to. I think that what they taught us is that we are better together. And a good point is the voter file, the data, all the information that the party brought. But they brought together a new way of thinking. They were not afraid to step into the unknown. And I think that is something that organizations that are highly structured are innately or are incapable of doing sometimes, and you need that shock. You need people to say, no, wait, we actually can win that race, and to just do it. And I think you saw that in David Reed's district. You saw it all over Northern Virginia, Henrico, and down in Virginia Beach and off in Norfolk. These were people that were unafraid to take a step forward. And Tom Perriello's PAC, great example. They trained these candidates.
Yes, they did.
And they were giving them funds and stuff when, let's be honest, the Democratic Party was not there for a lot of them, but they were. They were there for them. They trained them. They connected them to donors. They taught them the nuts and bolts of campaigning, and that was critical.
But isn't there room for everybody? I mean, literally. I mean, just because, yes, some of these committees are very institutional.
Right.
And the thing about institutions is they kind of get this thing where you start to feel like you have to preserve the institution, not necessarily focused on what the institution was created to do. That happens. No matter what it is, big organizations get that way. And so it seems to me there's still a place for that, but there's a place for all of these other caucuses and PACs and organizations like the Liberal Women of Chesterfield, and that there's no pie that gets divided. We just build a bigger pie. To me, the strength of the Democratic Party in this area is that we are building a bigger pie.
I completely agree with you. I really got to say, too, that at Fairfax County, we did a great job internally of welcoming the new members, of bringing them in. And I think you see some other county committees that didn't do that. There's a lot of, they aren't united. And in Fairfax, we're united around a common goal and a common purpose. And we saw ourselves really as our collective democratic whole, if you will. And it's not just the party, it's all of us. And we absolutely must have it must be that coalition that wins, because we weren't winning before this.
Right.
And at least not the same manner we were after 2017.
Right. So we were red, we were purple, now we're moving into blue. And I know that, Fairfax County has taken a position on gerrymandering, too, which is kind of the problem we have to solve before we can solve all of the other problems, because we are still struggling, with how these districts have been gerrymandered, so that even though statewide you've got about as many Republicans voting as many Democrats, that's not our legislature, not until this blue wave that happened in 2017.
And just to give you an idea of how strong gerrymandering is and how powerful it is, imagine that wave with districts that were shaped just a bit differently. I mean, some of the districts that went down were drawn to be very, very, very partisan. And so, just taking a bit of more of a topographical step back, even now we're talking about this Congress blue wave. Blue wave, we'll be lucky if we get D+1 or 2 in the House. That's a wave? Are you kidding me?
I know.
So, we were just talking about districts, and there's no there in some of these places, and that's, that gets to the heart of some of these boundaries that we have, is that when you're getting you got a mapping program that can just spit out any different, sometimes millions or billions of iterations of one congressional map, and I'm not kidding. And you can do that to the state level. And so you get situations like Wisconsin and then Pennsylvania.
I know. And that is something, when we return from this break, we're going to talk further with Dan Lagana, who is the new chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, the largest committee here in Virginia that does a lot of organizing in the Northern Virginia area. And we're going to pick Dan's brain just a little bit more when we get back from this break.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America, and reading is fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your hosts.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, talking tonight with Dan Lagana of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. We have a call from Brian in Fairfax. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Catherine. A longtime fan, first-time caller. I'm wondering, I like you guys talking about the primary process and all that, but I read recently Nancy Pelosi messed with some local primary somewhere. I can't remember the details of that. But how do we make sure that the national Democrats don't mess with the local Democrats?
What an excellent question, Brian. Thank you for that, Dan.
And I'll take it off the air.
Thank you.
The short answer, you can't. They're going to do what they're going to do. They have their strategic imperatives, whatever those may be. They're going to follow that. And the Brian is referencing the DCCC, which is a campaign arm of House Democrats, and they have waded into some primaries in other parts of the country, and there's really not a whole lot you can do to prevent that.
And it's not just Nancy Pelosi, because we have had instances where we've had a sitting Democratic governor weigh into a primary amongst Democrats.
Right.
That was, I can remember being very incensed during the 2015 campaign when Terry McAuliffe backed a candidate down in the Richmond area against Emily Francis, who sits with me on the board of Virginia's list. And I was kind of surprised that a governor would do that. And his sort of, in Governor McAuliffe's rationalization was, well, he was backing the person he thought was the only one who could get elected. But at the end of the day, that guy wasn't elected.
Right.
So, I think to Brian's point, you have to be very careful about who weighs in and whether or not it actually works the way you intended for it to work.
You have to really be cautious. This is my general opinion of, especially, you're putting yourself as a candidate before the voters. It's their decision to decide. Now, endorsements matter to a point. I do question their value on a lot of, if it's a local race and let's say the former delegate is stepping down and he's very popular or she's been there for a long time, it's one thing. Or around here, the Washington Post can definitely have an impact on a local race around here. But endorsements are more of a signal and they come with resources. And I think that's the way to look at them.
What about committees endorsing? I think we have a situation in the Richmond area right now, too, in a primary situation. Does your committee endorse ahead of primaries?
No. I mean, we do not get involved. We do not endorse primaries. We are arbiters of the primary process. And you cannot be an arbiter of a process and be
picking sides.
Yeah. And that's the problem.
That would make sense. But I do think we kind of currently have a situation. And so there are all these factors, and that seems to be something our callers are interested in, is what impacts the process. And how do we, and I would just say, from my point of view, Virginia's list, which exists to endorse women candidates, Democratic women candidates running for office, we endorse in primaries for women candidates who are not running against another woman candidate, right? But we give money in primaries because women often don't get out of the primary process.
Right.
They get killed in the primary and they never get on the general ballot. So we are committed to being part of that primary process so that we can get women on the general ballot, because there's just too many times where, especially when you've got 3 or 4 or more candidates, where women cannot get enough traction, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So, I'm kind of with you on this as far as trying to sort this out. So it looks like we've got another caller. It's Oscar. Do we have Oscar on the line from Fairfax? Hello, Oscar.
Hello. My name is Oscar. I'm in the Seven Corners area at the very edge of Fairfax County. You guys were talking about gerrymandering before, and Fairfax, as you guys spoke to earlier, is a very large area. I remember once hearing a lot of party leaders saying, Fairfax can't pretend that we are Virginia. There is a lot more Virginia out there. But we are a seventh of Virginia, maybe an eighth. I'm not quite sure how much our population has grown. When it comes to gerrymandering, there are only 2 people on the County Board of Supervisors that are Republican. Why aren't the Democrats leading the way in terms of battling gerrymandering by first un-gerrymandering the county itself? Or do you not believe the county's gerrymandering? It'd be interesting to hear your opinion. Thank you.
That is a great question, Oscar. Thank you so much. So what about that? Democrats are not innocent in this process. No. I mean, in gerrymandering, both parties have done an equally terrible job of trying to draw to incumbency. Incumbency, that's the difference. When you ask elected leaders to draw lines every 10 years, they are going to draw them to protect incumbents, not necessarily just red or blue, Democrat or Republican.
Right. And can I just say, well, I think we'll probably answer Oscar's question when we finish what we started before, because Oscar brought up some very good points. So absolutely, and I think we're getting to the heart of the problem with all of this is that it's about incentives. Parties seek to maximize power. And I say that as the chair of the Democratic Party in Fairfax County. And I have no quibble saying that. My mandate is to elect Democrats. So I'm going to go and try and get a Democrat elected in Springfield and get a Democrat elected in Braddock District, to get he who shall not be named off the school board in Sully District. That's my mandate. And the laws have to change beneath of this, and the courts have to solve this, because the only incentive that a party or a legislature is going to have is to say, well, I'm going to draw the most partisan map I possibly can this time, because the next time the census comes around, my opposition is just going to do the same thing to me. So I need to maximize my control. And that's really a perverse basket of incentives that we have got to change. And I'm very hopeful for Gill versus Whitford, because that case coming out of the Supreme Court is really going to have a lasting impact on our political system. I mean, absolutely.
So is that the Wisconsin case?
Yes.
That's the Wisconsin case. That's what I thought. But this is a very interesting Supreme Court that we have right now.
It is.
So worst case scenario, what if they don't come back and say that partisanship is prohibited in redistricting?
Well, there are a few different scenarios that, put it this way. What's interesting is they refuse to take up the Pennsylvania case. So the Pennsylvania map right now, and if people want to see what balanced districts look like, look at the new Pennsylvania map and look at the old Pennsylvania map. And it was just, it's just incredible, the difference. But they refuse to take that up. Now, I wonder what that means. So does that foretells something about the Gill versus Whitford decision, is that they refuse to take the Republican challenge to the Supreme Court decision in Pennsylvania, and they allow those districts, the new districts, to remain. That could mean a more favorable outcome. Maybe the test that lies at the heart of the decision is left, or maybe they're going to say, well, state Supreme Courts can do that.
See, that's what I'm afraid of.
And so if that's the case, then perhaps, maybe, there's still hope, because you can adjust, you can make change at the state Supreme Court level. But in terms of your original question, unless there's a law change, nothing changes.
Right.
The incentives have to change.
And that is perverse. It's problematic, because it is the first problem we need to solve. And yes, within the county, and I've heard this too, how the magisterial districts are drawn, because let's face it, every 10 years, populations shift.
Right.
Right? People migrate around the county.
They do.
There's places in the Western County that used to be far more rural than they are.
Right.
And to his point about the number of Democrats on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, also understand whenever you have high density urban populations, they tend to be more liberal.
They do.
That's just a fact.
They do.
So some of that's not necessarily the lines drawn, it's this exploding population in various cities and towns within the county.
Look at Eastern Loudoun County. Great example of what you're talking about. But you're right about the districts are, of course, gerrymandered. They're drawn for a particular reason. And there's no reason that, if you look at Sully District, it looks like a meat cleaver. You've got this little handle that comes out, and there's no. We were just talking about a there isn't one. You've got some pieces of Oakton, then it goes down to Chantilly, then Centerville.
Really crazy.
So, yes, they are drawn. They are gerrymandered, and that's the fact of life right now. And that's one of the reasons why Gill is so important for our. Frankly,
and there's a lot of people working on it. I will give a shout out to One Virginia 2021, Brian Cannon, and they're doing work here in Virginia. Mm-hmm. There are other states who've already voluntarily done this. California has nonpartisan redistricting, Arizona, Ohio. There are other states that are ahead of us on the curve as far as how they've decided to do nonpartisan redistricting. Right. So it's not that it's off the table in Virginia. It's not.
It's absolutely not off the table. There's still a lot that can be done. Arizona is a good example. They actually have a really well-balanced congressional delegation. I believe it's 5-4 for the Republicans right now, but it has a reputation as a really red state.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still a very political process who is on this commission in California and Arizona and so forth. I really do think that the best option that we have is that we change the basket of incentives that underlie this. And the way you do that is through law, a test, or something.
So just to wrap this kind of thing up on the gerrymandering, here in Virginia, where our districts are gerrymandered, are the two competitive races here 1 and 10? The 10th congressional? I know the 10th congressional is considered a very...
2 and 10.
2 and 10.
2 and 10.
2 and 10.
2, 10, 5, 7, maybe those, you can play around with the order on the last two. Yeah, they are. I mean, what's funny is that the 10th congressional district, which is, most of West Fairfax, then the northern parts by the Potomac and McLean, and then all the way out to Loudoun and Winchester.
And to West Virginia.
Right. It has both what you want in a district and more of a geographic center, if you will, but it does cross this vast landscape that goes from suburban attitudes, rapidly urbanizing eastern Loudoun County to very rural and western parts of the 10th. And Clark County and Frederick County, there's a lot of Republican votes out there.
I know, and to try to wrap that into McLean is very difficult. And I think in the past what we have seen is that McLean candidates, Wolf and Comstock, have come from the eastern end,
right.
not terribly representative of that huge district. So when we come back from this break, we are going to continue this discussion with Dan Lagana, who is the chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. So if you want to give us a call, give us a call.
One day these rats were playing in the wood. One in some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about $3,000. Nothing very nice. Homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home? When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is? What? More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school, These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to our final segment here on Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Dan Lagana, who is the chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Dan, we were talking about the 10th Congressional District. Right. It's oddly shaped. It's got a mix of people. Tell us a little bit more about how you're seeing that Democratic primary shaping up and how you see the general shaping up.
You know, it's interesting because you've had, as you pointed out before we went to break, you've had both Wolf, who is the previous congressman for that
30 years.
30 years. And then you have Barbara Comstock, who is the current representative. Both come from Fairfax County, the eastern, very wealthy suburbs of McLean. And which is interesting because the district spans not only the suburbs, but it goes it goes straight to the West Virginia border. And so it's a question of straddling you have, in one sense, a region in change.
Right.
And the Washington region is undergoing a lot of demographic change, and it's becoming younger in some respects. It's urbanizing, it's growing, the workforce is changing, and it's growing into a much more of a knowledge-based economy. And you've got this landscape more to the west, much more. You've got horse farms, agriculture, you name it. And you've got a very diverse district with very diverse needs. And so it's really going to be a question, I think, of spanning that district, but frankly, it's also making sure that your voters turn out and that you're making a good case for yourself.
So are there 6 candidates now?
No, there are 6.
6 candidates.
6 candidates.
Yeah, and I think the Democratic Business Council of Northern Virginia this Friday morning, DemBiz is actually having all 6 of the candidates.
All 6 there.
Yeah, at a special forum this
Right.
Friday, and dembiz.org for anybody who wants to come out and hear these 6 candidates talk about why they should be the Democratic nominee.
Right.
I think that's important because I think, because we have such a high concentration of Democrats, whenever any seat comes open, I think about the 8th Congressional District, there were like 13 candidates.
I know.
And then it fractures it so much when
Right.
you've got 13 people running, and 6 is still a lot as well. And so I think voters really need to understand where these people are coming from, not just geographically, but how they intend to represent people from such a wide-ranging district.
Right. Creating separation for yourself and distinguishing yourself is the most significant challenge that a candidate running in a wide primary or a large primary field faces. And so if your viewers are looking at this race or people are interested, that's how I would look at this, frankly.
Right.
And you also have to see and be very realistic and say to yourself, this person is going to be representing this district. They're going to be running against Barbara. If they win, they're going to be representing us. And so it's a different. This is a bit of a different primary in that respect.
Yeah.
You have a very competitive primary for a very competitive seat in a very diverse district.
Yeah, and a very competitive state.
Right.
I mean, in a Commonwealth, Virginia really has surprised a lot of people, and I think that has a lot to do with urbanization. We just have more Democratic voters packed tightly, not into a large geography, but in a very small geography.
Correct. You do. You have the growth of the DC suburbs, but not just DC. You can make the same argument. Eastern Loudoun. You can make the same argument in Henrico.
Oh, and in Prince William.
Easily. Prince William.
Prince William, all those seats turned over to Democrats.
They are, and what's interesting is that it's the workforce here is changing. You can go to any event that's not political, like the Fairfax County EDA. They do, you really want to see what's going on in the county. You can look at just the construction of the Silver Line going out to Dulles.
We have not even talked about that. What putting metro transportation out into Loudoun County is going to do as
Right.
far as changing the demographics of that county.
The density is just a game changer, and you start getting a much different population coming in. So it's which creates has different attitudes from even some of the existing Democrats, if you will. But it's a total game changer, and what these folks are awake now, and because we're so near Washington, D.C., these national currents that we spoke about at the beginning of the program start, find themselves traveling down the metro, if you will, and all of a sudden you've got a much more engaged but also transient population. It's an odd
That's
combination.
true. That's true. And I think in June I'm going to have a young woman on from Rise to Run, which is also one of these new organizations that is encouraging young people. When I say young people, I'm looking at the Parkland High School student leaders who are suddenly very engaged. And it's not about politics, it's issue advocacy.
Correct.
And they are leading based not from a political perspective, which is something I think the Democratic Party and quite frankly the Republican Party needs to look at, is these students and these young people are finding a different way to be effective outside of this very traditional, pick an R, pick a D sort of thing. They're going forward and they're making a difference because they are leading on issues. So again, Fairfax County seems to attract a lot of these organizations, some of them quite new, encouraging candidates to run. But there's plenty of room at the table for everyone to peacefully coexist, and from where I'm sitting anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the more the merrier. That's my approach to this, is that I think we need the more groups and the more people that become engaged, the better it is. But in that same vein, the Democratic Party, and I mean the broader nebulous D, if you will, needs to make sure that they're accepting. These are partners. They aren't subordinates. I heard an elected representative call them pop-up groups. I'm gonna go talk to the pop. They didn't mean anything by it, but that's not what they are. No, they're grassroots groups.
They're disruptors.
They're disruptors, and you need to acknowledge that, but also say to themselves, well, what are they doing right? They did something right that we weren't doing. And but we were able to help them because we had the structure to it. So that combination was a winning formula, and I think that is the way to go. And you adapt, and you change, and that's how you evolve. You don't resist and put them away.
I agree, and I think one of the things that also we have to be very careful of at all levels is that people have got to make a path for young people to move forward.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people who love their jobs. I get it. But when you stay in your job for 30 years, where does that leave people except with a choice to challenge you?
Right.
Because you aren't going to, you're not like saying, well, time for the next wave of young. No, the people are kind of hanging on.
Right.
And I don't know what they expect except that somebody's going to challenge you.
Right.
So we all just need to deal with that as a party.
We do. And I would say that this is a question that people are working longer, they're living longer, they're engaged longer. It's also, and this is probably a topic maybe for a different show, but it's a generational problem that can either become more of a conflict later on. And it's something that can come easily or may come
with a struggle.
And sometimes it does. Maybe that's what needs to happen.
And maybe that does. Something, and that's not a tragedy.
Right.
It really isn't.
It isn't.
Change to me, there's different paths to change, but the one constant is change. It's going to change.
It's going to change.
So let's talk a little bit about the Jefferson Obama dinner, which is coming up. In fact, it's this Sunday night.
It is. The Jefferson Obama dinner is our annual fundraiser for the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. And this year we're very proud to have our U.S. Senator Tim Kaine is going to be our guest of honor. We were also very fortunate to have our keynote speaker be Representative Seth Moulton from Pennsylvania, who's a rising star in the Democratic Party, and he's going to be going around to competitive congressional districts, and he's coming back to ours, to Fairfax County, because we're building our theme around take back the House.
Right.
And we want to take the 10th, and we will take the 10th, but it's going to take hard work, and that's going to be the message of the dinner. We're also very fortunate to have Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax is going to speak, and each one of our our speakers is going to be introduced by one of the Blue Wave delegates. So, Carrie Delaney is going to introduce Lieutenant Governor of Fairfax. Dante Tanner, who came up just so short.
I know, very short.
Is going to introduce Seth Moulton, and Kathy Tran is going to introduce Senator Tim Kaine. And we're also going to hear from Representatives Connolly and Beyer as well. But this is an event that's open to everyone.
Right.
And anyone can come. They can just go to fairfaxdemocrats.org to purchase their tickets. And every dime that we raise for this is put to use for either our campaign activities, pays for our infrastructure and our data and our office and staff. And that's why this event is so important.
And this is a good way kind of to find out it's a huge dinner,
it's
right?
A who's who, yeah.
It's
a fun dinner. You know, there's silent auctions, you meet people, you know, it's fun. It is fun.
So in the few minutes we have left, let's talk about primaries. You know, you say that we have elections every year in Virginia, and we do.
Right.
We've got a May election this year, which people it's not on their radar, but let's talk about the primaries in June.
Right. So we've got the primaries coming up in June we've got not a whole in the 10th. That's what we have. So if you live in one of the 49 precincts in Fairfax County that's in the 10th, so if you're in McLean or Great Falls or in Chantilly or Clifton and you're watching the show, then you should, it's probably you're in that area in the 10th congressional district, and we've got 6 candidates on the ballot. I'm very confident that no matter who wins, is going to defeat Barbara Comstock, because each one of them has demonstrated that they have the work ethic, the tenacity, and the skill, I think, and the aptitude to win a race like that. So
I think you're right, and people need to become more informed, because again, if you don't get out and vote in that primary, then somebody else, your neighbor, decides who gets on the general ballot.
Exactly.
So you abdicate your ability to make a choice when you don't participate.
And that couldn't be more accurate. You're giving someone else the decision, essentially.
Yeah, someone else is deciding.
Someone else is deciding for you.
So the last thing I'm going to say is thank you very much for being here, Dan. It's been
thanks for having
wonderful. Me. I'm going to say to the people watching, May 1st is Election Day in Fairfax City and in Vienna and in other areas, not just in Fairfax County, but all across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So if you're not sure, go online and find out if you're living in a city or a town that has municipal elections tomorrow. Because again, if you don't pick, your neighbors pick, or the people down the street pick, or all kinds of people pick that aren't you. I hope this has really been informative. If you want more information, the Fairfax Democratic Committee is easy to find. Thanks for joining us.